Chapter 5. Mama explained that housekeeping was difficult for her because she had never been taught the basics. That was because, as a young girl, she had had a nanny to do things for her. Papa was always helping out and inventing ways to make Mama's work easier, like putting cheese into the mouse traps that were kept in Mama's storage room, which we called the closet off the bathroom, or in the place under the eaves where Papa kept his records. Both of these places were off limits to us, but of course we didn't always obey the orders. On occasion we met up with some startling experiences in these forbidden places. Mama's mother, Grandma Nora Talbert, verified Mama's claims when she came to visit every summer from Los Angeles, where she was a seamstress and fitter at the May Company. We called her Mother, a name she and Mama contrived because she didn't want to be called Grandma. As Mama pointed out, she is not the rocking chair type. Papa agreed and gave a forecast of pending activities. She'll bring you the latest patterns and all the hot gossip about the movie stars. We knew. We were crazy to hear anything about movies. Papa and Mama had begun taking us as soon as Dor had learned not to scream to be nursed. The days of Mother's visits were filled with happy camaraderie. Papa enjoyed badgering Mother, calling her a gypsy, and predicting that, because of her spendthrift ways, she'd end up being buried by the county. I knew, however, that he had great respect and admiration for her. And I was aware that she consulted him about a problem she was having, something about Mama's father, who was seldom discussed. Mother loved being with Mama, her only child, and didn't mind spending her vacations helping out, washing, ironing, and sewing on our wardrobes. Much of our visiting was done around the fancy carved oak sewing machine with the decorative shiny black cast iron legs. Mother pulled it around so that she could sit facing into the room, and we girls would sit on the floor and listen to her stories. True to Papa's predictions, much of the talk was about movie stars. Mother said that many of the movie stars bought their clothes at May Company, where she worked as a fitter, and that she had information that even the top reporters couldn't get, because during the fittings, they chatter on about the intimate details of their lives. One of Mother's most shocking stories was about some of the movie stars who came to the May Company for fittings, with absolutely nothing on underneath. What a revelation that was to 3 little girls who, like most other girls in the nation, spent most of their waking hours in homemade black bloomers. How we hated black bloomers. If the Tooth Fairy had given us one wish, it would have been that our black bloomers would suddenly be transformed into pink panties with lace. The kind movie stars wear, Fleur said. When they are wearing their underwear, I added. Dor needed clarification. So some movie stars go to the May Company with nothing on underneath, and some go in their underwear, huh, Mother? Mother shook her head and laughed. Fleur perpetually whined, "How long are we going to have to wear black bloomers?" Papa responded, "Until your mother runs out of black sateen." That seemed like an eternity. We had yards and yards of black sateen that Papa had bought at a fire sale and stored in the big, sturdy chest with the solid brass handles that he had built from packing cases before they moved from California to Oregon. Papa called it the cedar chest, although he explained that it wasn't cedar. And because it wasn't cedar, it didn't smell like cedar. It smelled like camphor balls. Papa had great faith in camphor balls and said that if they ever came and took him off to the poorhouse, a real possibility in his mind, at least they wouldn't have the pleasure of dragging him there in moth-eaten clothes. Fleur complained that the boys made remarks about our black bloomers. That got Papa's attention. How would boys know you wear black bloomers? They see our black bloomers every Monday, Fleur pouted. It was a fact. Every Monday in our house, just like every other house in the nation, was wash day. And on every wash day, the Bigham clothesline, in plain view for all the world to see, was full of the hideous black garments flapping in the breeze. Ironically, Monday was the day ordained for all the neighborhood boys to run errands through our backyard. As Mother sewed and told stories about Hollywood, Mama gave us the chore of straightening out the drawers, untangling thread, winding odd pieces of lace or trim around a bit of cardboard, and separating out the needles from the pins. I loved the button box. I'd pour the contents into the cradle of my skirt and examine each button. Most were small and white, clipped from Papa's worn-out shirts before they went into the rag bag, but some were magic. They changed colors as they turned about in the light. Some had gold or silver trim around the edges. I imagined they had once been sewn onto the suit of a handsome California prince. My greatest dream in all the world, something I would never confess to anyone, was to be a movie star. Of course, I knew that was impossible. Movie stars didn't have big feet, but I had one hope. Papa said I sang beautifully. It seemed Big Feet didn't interfere with singing, so maybe a handsome knight on a white horse might hear me and carry me away to fairyland. Sitting near the machine, I became fascinated with the operation of the foot pedal and grew aware of the differences between Mother's way and Mama's way. Mother forced the treadle back with her left foot, and with just the toe of her right foot, she'd bring it forward again. Mama, on the other hand, used both feet squarely on the treadle, pumping furiously. Mother's method was rhythmic and soothing, and had a mesmerizing effect. Mama's was jerky and seemed to take more energy. I wondered why Mama hadn't learned Mother's way because, as Mama always said proudly, "My mother taught me everything." Papa's response was, "I wonder what went wrong." It was a good way of describing Mama's sewing abilities. Although she'd start out in the proper way, pinning the tissue paper pattern to the material, marking darts with tailor's chalk, cutting on the lines, somewhere along the way, Mama started to improvise, adding tucks and gathers, or inserting a piece here or there. Unfortunately, Mama was a poor improviser. Mother must have been staggered by Mama's sewing, but she wasn't one to criticize. Instead, she'd spend hours ripping, restitching, and tucking in Mama's raw edges, conceding, "Well, you'll never see it on a galloping horse." In spite of all the hours that Mama and Mother spent sewing, we girls weren't always thrilled with the results, especially with dresses made from damaged garments that Mother brought from the May Company. She explained, "The movie stars love to wear their clothes tight. It shows off their figures, so they try to squeeze into small sizes and split the seams." Mama consoled us. "I realize the style is a little old, but the material is gorgeous, and you can be happy knowing that it might have been tried on by Marion Davis." I was not convinced. What I really wanted was a dress like Helen Louis, the most popular girl in my class, who wore flimsy cotton that clung to her legs when the wind blew. But alas, we were either dressed in silks and satins from Hollywood or another gorgeous fabric. At least, Papa said it was gorgeous. Wool gabardine. We had bolts and bolts of this material stored in the chest with the black sateen. The wearing of the gabardine went on for years and brought us considerable recognition. "Don't tell me you've got another gabardine suit," Flora complained. "How can I get any boyfriends if I smell like a smokestack and camphor balls and spend all day scratching?" "Someday when you realize the value of materials, you'll be very happy about the gabardine," Papa said. We scoffed at the absurdity, ignoring the fact that Papa's predictions had a bad habit of coming true. Although we were accustomed to seeing Mama in cotton house dresses, we knew that she had beautiful clothes stored in the closet off the bathroom. Florence explained, "Mama wore these clothes when she was young and had suitors. That's the same as boyfriends, only they wear suits." Even though we were aware of the strong odor of cheddar cheese and the presence of mousetraps, we loved getting into the boxes. In one box, we found 8 or 10 old watches with intricate carvings and beautifully painted faces. They reminded us of stagecoach robberies we saw at the movies. "Everybody take off your jewelry and put it in my hat," Flora growled in her Big Bad Bart imitation. I imitated someone, but I'm not sure who. "And take off your feathered hats." "And your old corsets," Dor squeaked. "But they can't take off their corsets," I protested. "They would be." Dor was more daring than me. "Yeah, they would be naked." That was not the sort of thing we saw at the movies. One day Dor, who was probably 10 at the time, and I found a nest of tiny mice in a battered old carton. This caused a dilemma. Of course we couldn't kill them. They were only babies. But if we let them loose, they'd be caught in the traps, and we'd find their poor little bodies with a spring over their precious little necks. We were busy deciding their fates when Mama called from downstairs. "Hurry and come for lunch. I'm going to the garden club." The only thing to do was take the carton down and, as Big Bad Bart would say, plead for mercy. Mama, in her dark green gabardine suit, a color Papa had suggested for wearing to the garden club, began upbraiding us. "You've been in the boxes of old clothes again." It was fairly obvious. Dor was wearing the hat with all the feathers, and I had on an old corset with 2 watches swinging from my neck. All of this became irrelevant when we showed her what was in the carton. After Mama's initial shock, she demanded that we take the mic into the woods and let them loose, which we would have done, except that going down the back steps, I tripped over my shoelaces and, hickory-dicky-dock, the mice ran. Only one mouse remained in the carton, and that gave Dor a belief in divine providence. She cupped him in her hands, and we returned to the kitchen. I got out an old pickle jar and punched holes in the lid, while she consoled the mouse. "Don't worry, Mommy will take care of you." When Papa came home from the office, Dorothy met him at the front steps. "Will you build a cage for Mickey?" She had already named him. Mama was obviously agitated. "I'm not going to have a mouse in my house." Papa set his briefcase by the piano. "You've already got a dozen or so mice in your house. What difference does it make if one is in a cage?" Mama calmed down. "However do mice get in a house anyway?" Papa was already halfway up the stairs. "They come in," his voice trailed off. In a few minutes we heard him returning, clumping along the upstairs hall in his work shoes. We knew he had already changed from his business suit into blue coveralls, his lounging clothes. He continued on. "Through the door, when you leave it open because you're out chewing the rag with the neighbors, or the delivery boys bring them in with the sacks of flour, or they come up through the sewer pipes, up through the toilet." All the females present were bordering on hysteria, but Papa dug out the keys to his car. "I'm heading for the hardware store." Papa had the same passion for hardware stores as he had for fire sales. "Anything you need besides mousetraps?" "Well, you'd better get a round of cheddar cheese," Mama said. Dor called out, "And get some bright red paint, Papa, the shiny kind." Papa built a little cage and Dor painted it. She spent the next several days blowing on it to hurry the drying, and one evening she installed Mickey and his belongings. Mickey responded remarkably to Dor's training, but Papa always warned her, "Mickey better not get near the stew pot. If he falls in, Mama will just turn the burner up." He took every opportunity to heckle Mama. When he'd be chewing on a bone from some new exotic dish Mama had concocted, he would say, "I think I got a piece of Mickey's tail." Papa's occupation of investigating fires gave him the inside track to lots of wonderful bargains. Mama wasn't always elated. Papa's wonderful bargains were usually things we didn't need and seldom used, and they stacked up in the basement or the attic. Everything smelled like smoke. But of course, Papa always had a remedy. "If it smells of smoke, hang it on the clothesline. Then it'll smell like Limburger cheese." Which do you prefer, Limburger cheese or smoke? It was a hard decision. One day Papa came into the house directing 2 delivery men who were carrying a large object. He explained to us, "It's a labor-saving device, guaranteed to keep your hands out of dishwater for the rest of your lives." We were amazed at the promised miracle, and at the space the new gadget took up in the kitchen. It was as large as Mama's beautiful electric range, but unlike the range, it was unsightly. It was the same color that Papa created when he dumped all the leftover cans of paint into a big bucket and, at Mama's suggestion, painted the garbage can. Once this new thing was in place, Papa began putting in the breakfast dishes and silverware. When it was filled, and I don't mean literally, all of our cupboards put together didn't contain enough dishes to fill it. Papa said, "I can probably get a contract to do the dishwashing for the Olympic Hotel." Then, Papa filled a bucket with water at the sink, carried it dripping across the kitchen floor, and emptied it into the new contraption. Mother, on her usual summer visit, had been standing back, looking amused. "Is that standard procedure?" Papa was now measuring powdered soap. "Nope, this is not standard procedure. When I get my first million, I'll get it plumbed." After Papa checked to see that it was sitting level, something he admitted he should have done before he filled it with water and dishes, and would have done if he hadn't had 5 females standing around asking stupid questions, he plugged it in. It sounded like the rain barrel after a heavy storm. Papa warned, "You never want to open the top while it's in operation." We hung around trying to imagine how dishes could get clean without being scrubbed. In no time at all, the thing was steaming. Papa began wiping his glasses. Floor detected other noises. "It sounds like the silverware is jumping around." It sure did, but of course we couldn't open it to check until it was finished. Finally, Papa turned it off and lifted the top. A blast of steam hit him, fogging his glasses. He felt his way along the drain board, groping for a towel. "Don't touch anything until it cools down." When that time arrived, we found that Floor's assessment had been correct. The silverware had indeed been jumping around. The result was not good for the silverware, but it furnished us with table-setting conversation for years to come. "Who wants to eat with the funny fork?" Floor and I were instructed on how to drain the water from a spigot underneath. In the days to come, we were given the responsibility for the complete operation. It was hard work lifting heavy buckets, and often we'd forget to close the spigot and end up with a deluge on the floor. Floor moaned, "How can this be labor-saving?" Mother wrote in her letters to Mama, "Has Roy gotten the plumbing done yet?" Papa answered, "Tell her I still haven't got my first million." Mac offered suggestions. "You could cut down on the steam by venting it up through the ceiling. Papa had already thought of that. Only problem is the vent would come up in the middle of the bathtub. Well, you could move the bathtub, Max suggested. Papa had thought of that too. Or you could move it to the basement, Max said. Running up and down the stairs with the dishes would make good exercise for Tenny. Mama soon tired of sloshing around in the soap suds on the floor and waiting out every wash cycle to see which piece of sterling silver had fallen victim. She said, "With all this luxury, the girls are getting lazy." She never actually refused to use the dishwasher anymore. She just began storing things in it, a big sack of oatmeal and empty olive jars she saved for making jelly. On top, she put such things as our shoes that had to go to the repair shop. Finally, Papa threatened to sell it. Mama said, "That's fine. I can use the money for new kitchen linoleum." Papa considered us all unimaginative. He demonstrated his gadget to his friends, but to his amazement, none of them seemed to share his enthusiasm, and none of the women begged their husbands for similar devices. The general consensus was that a dishwasher in the home was a frivolity that made no sense at all, and that if one was intent on making $1 million, he'd better come up with a better idea than that.